video I did for the Kids Cornerstone. That's Todd Hernandez, and it's called The Story of Jonah, if you ever want to look it up, or if you want to share that on Facebook. One of the guys on the pumping page, actually the guy that runs the pumping page, concrete pumping page that we belong to on Facebook, sent that to me, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. Also, before I get started, happy anniversary to Jim and Laura. Today is their anniversary. If you get a chance, wish them happy anniversary. All right, God is good. And all the time. I want to share a story with you that is filled with paradoxes. It's the all-inspiring story of Daniel in the lion's den. And I think a lot of us know the story. I think culturally, we use it as a great metaphor, get thrown into the lion's den. So even non-believers, people that don't read a lot of Scripture, are familiar with the parameters of the story. But it's a story with a lot of paradox. So Daniel, the name, that's one of the things I love about so many of these Hebrew names. Like when you break them down, they mean something. Like Israel means, to wrestle with God. Moses, I think, means one that's dunked in the water or something. I don't know. But Daniel, God is my judge. And actually, Daniel kind of lived his life like no one judges me but God. So the paradoxes in Daniel's life and in the story begin with the fact that Daniel excels in the midst of an exile. So God punishes the nation of Israel. They're in the promised land. They're breaking the Sabbaths. They're disobeying God. They're worshiping false idols. A lot of wickedness. And so he warns them, right? That's what the book of Jeremiah is all about, right? Warning them. You need to turn from your ways, right? They're taken from the promised land, and they're taken all the way over to Babylon. They're forcibly removed from their land, forcibly relocated, but yet Daniel, he's amazing. He's a shining star. He's brilliant, and he excels in this situation. Another paradox. He's studious, right? I mean, he's super smart, but he's successful as a believer in God in a land that is hostile to the God of Israel. They're captured by God's people's greatest enemy, and yet he is still successful in the midst of all that persecution. Also, huge paradox if you read the book of Daniel. Not only is he successful, he's a servant to God's enemies while he stays faithful to the God of Israel. So it'd be like if you were a believer and you worked for the IRS. No, I'm kidding. But he's still successful while he's being oppressed, and he's this powerful prophet for God in this midst of this persecution, right? Here's another paradox. As the book of Daniel unfolds, he ends up holding the highest ranking position in all of the society, while he is a Jewish person who socially and ethnically has the lowest ranking position in their society. He ends up being second only to the king before the story is over, but he is the lowest person in their society. He worships freely, worships the God of Israel freely in a land that has no religious freedom. Time and time again, when you look in the story, they're only to worship the golden idol. They're only to worship the king himself. They're only to worship their gods. Have you whatever. They're not supposed to be worshiping the God of Israel. Look, a lot of Christians are always seeming worried about our religious freedoms in America, Oh, what if they take away the First Amendment, or, they took prayer out of the public school, and all this, our religious freedoms are always being encroached upon, right? We worry about that. That's natural, I get it. Daniel continues to worship faithfully in a land that knows real persecution. So there's paradox on top of paradox. Where are they? Where is Daniel? Where is King Darius? Where is Nebuchadnezzar? Where does this all take place when you think of the book of Daniel? basically modern day Iran and Iraq. So here's Jerusalem, right? The Mediterranean Sea. Here's the Holy Land. They're taken over here. This is Babylon, right? So this is modern day Iraq, right? The Medes and Persians will come in and take over the Babylonians before the story is over, which is all historical. But they come down from here. So here's the Persian Gulf, right? So they come from over here and they end up conquering. So Daniel will serve Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Then he'll serve Darius, the king of the Medes and the Persians. And he's successful in all of this. Interesting side note. They're rewriting the map back then, right? The world map. Today, the map of the world is constantly through dominating dictators, warmongers. People are rewriting the map of the world today. Probably right now, as we speak, parts of the map are being rewritten. And we might not like the people who are rewriting the map. And it might be a frightening time on the world front. And so what can we do? I think that's where we look to the example of people like Daniel. I'm going to be in Daniel chapter 6. And I want you to notice Daniel, lowly Jewish guy, stands out and excels in how it's highlighted and how it's noticed. Daniel chapter 6, I'll start in verse 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom. Darius, he's the king who's just conquered Nebuchadnezzar. 120 satraps. So in history, a satrap is just like a modern day governor for us. All right? 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom and set over them 3 presidents. That can be like a prime minister, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps would give an account. Right? So that the king might suffer no loss. He wants to gather tributes. He wants to gather taxes. He wants to keep his property under control. Verse 3, this is what I really want you to notice. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other presidents and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. He stands out. He's sharp. He's smart. He's got something going on for him. But instead of getting a pat on his back, he gets a target on his back. The other satraps and the 2 other presidents don't say, "Man, Daniel, way to go. Look, your hard work's being paid off." That's not what happens at all. Then the presidents, verse 4, and satraps sought to find ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. They could find no ground or complaint or any fault because he was faithful, and no error was found in him. Verse 5, then these men said, "I will not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with his God." One way you can tell your friends from your enemies: can they celebrate your victories with you? Can they celebrate their accomplishments with you? Or does bitterness, envy, resentment set in when you do well? Daniel's doing well. He's being recognized. He's in this powerful position. And resentment sets in for the other ones. And they say, well, we'll find a way to get rid of him. But it'll be because of his relation. The way the story then unfolds, they're going to entrap him. Right? They're going to go to the king, and they do, and they say, "King, for the next 30 days, let no one pray to, entreat to any power, any god, anyone but you, O king." So they're playing to his pride, his ego. And if anyone does, well, then they've got to be thrown in the lion's den. Daniel knows this because he's at the top. He's in the staff meetings. He hears what's going on. He doesn't let it stop him. So they get the king to sign this in, and there's the law of the kings of the Medes and Persians. What's written can't be undone. Kind of like the king and I. Thus it is written, thus it shall be done. You can't undo it. You got to do it all. And so Daniel, who lives a life of no compromise. That's the title of the sermon today. No compromise. He doesn't change anything about his beliefs or his behaviors based on the context around him, right? Daniel knows they're trying to trap him. He knows what's going on. He lives his life like he always did. He's completely consistent with his life. Verse 10, when Daniel knew the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open towards Jerusalem. So Jerusalem's down here. He's in here. He faces his window towards Jerusalem because why? The temple. The only place where they could offer sacrifices, where the Holy of Holies is. Although the temple's in quite disrepair at this time, it won't be rebuilt for another couple hundred years. He prays that direction because that's where God's presence on earth is most recognized. He prays towards Jerusalem. He got down on his knee 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he previously had done. Well, they knew he's going to do this. So they go in there. They rough him up probably, push him around, bully him. I don't know what they do. Drag him before the king. Hey, didn't you sign this into effect? Well, guess what Daniel's been doing? Daniel's been praying to that God of his. You've got no choice, king. You wrote this into law. And I love how the king tries to get out of it, but he can't. Look at verse 14. The king heard these words. He was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. But he's stuck. He's bound by these laws. He labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said, Now, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and the Persians, that no injunction or ordinance of the king established can be changed. So the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of the lions. The king declared to Daniel, this guy's a non-believer. He's a pagan. He doesn't believe in the God of Israel. May your God, whom you've served continually, deliver you. And they put a stone over the hole. The king seals it with his own signet. And that night, it says the king goes without distractions or entertainment. And he stays up all night. And he's worried about Daniel. Daniel is a shining star in his world. Daniel has greatly impressed him. And he's up all night. And then something happens. He goes the next morning. They roll back the stone. And the king himself wants to know, did you make it? Did your life of no compromise? Did your faithfulness? Did it pay off, right? At daybreak, the king arose, went in haste to the den of the lions. And he came near the den where Daniel was. He cried out in a tone of anguish. This guy's heartbroken. He's gripped by deep emotion because he knows what happens. What happens when you go in the lion's den? You're going to be eaten. You're going to be destroyed. There's nothing left of you. The king declared, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent an angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they've not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I've done no harm." Verse 23, the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den of lions. So Daniel was taken up out of the den. No kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in God. Verse 24, then the king commanded, and this is the favorite part of the story for people with sense of humor like me, and the king commanded those men who had maliciously accused Daniel, and they were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, The lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces, right? They don't even hit the ground. It's like when you throw your dog a treat and it jumps in the air and catches it. All these lions are... And then King Darius wrote to the people, all nations and all languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall never end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Risky. Very risky. Daniel's life, when he first is inducted into their indoctrination program in Babylon, remember, he doesn't eat their pagan foods, not because he's a vegetarian. He's just eating the tomatoes and the cucumbers and the vegetables because their meat has been sacrificed on an altar. And the captain that's over him says, hey, you're going to make me look bad. If you start getting skinny and scrawny, it's going to reflect poorly on me. Daniel doesn't change. He's not going to eat the food sacrificed to idols. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? They don't bow down. The whole story of Daniel and his friends is one of risk. Risky. Practicing our faith is risky. Why? We live in a world that is in the battle of good and evil. You watch the news, it's not hard to see. You think of things in your life, it's not hard to see. We are in a cosmic, spiritual battle between good and evil. Practicing our faith is risky. Practicing our faith, though, impresses even pagan people like Darius. You know, look again at verse 16 if you have your Bible open. The king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast in the lion's den. The king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve, continually deliver you. Man, I don't believe in this God of yours. But I hope he can save you, Daniel. The way that you followed him, I can see that there's something legit going on here. I really hope he can save you. Then how does the story end? Darius is like, okay, this guy saves Daniel from my lion's den. Everybody ought to be afraid. Everybody ought to worship. Everybody ought to follow. As risky as it is, practicing our faith, I don't know how I can emphasize this strongly enough, is never limited by our circumstances. Right? Think of the context of Daniel. In a foreign country, hostile oppressors, forcibly removed from his home country, enslaved, told he can't worship God. He continues to worship, right? I don't know what excuses that we have to say, well, you know, I can't practice my faith. I can't do this, because the ability to be faithful is never limited to the circumstances around us. And I think Daniel highlights that maybe as well or better than any other book in the Bible. And practicing our faith is what equips us, it's what enables us to live a life of no compromise. Daniel is uncompromising in his faithfulness to God. Power, prestige, position, it doesn't matter. When he comes in as a lowly student to learn the ways of their wise men and magicians and astrologers, to the fact when he is above every other position, second only king, uncompromising, nothing changes, well-grounded, stable, strong, faithful. So there's the introduction to the sermon. I've said all of that to say, at the end of the day, you will either, you and I, all of us will either face the pain of self-discipline or the pain of regret. Daniel had self-discipline. I'm going to get up and I'm going to pray 3 times towards Jerusalem, no matter how busy my schedule is, no matter how many people are trying to persecute me, no matter what the threats are around me. I'm going to be a person of discipline. You'll either face the pain of discipline or you'll face the pain of regrets. Daniel had 0 regrets going into that. He didn't know if he was going to make it. He didn't know if God would save him or not. Certainly he hoped for it. Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they're thrown into the fiery furnace, our God can save us, but even if he doesn't. You remember that line? Daniel didn't know, but he had 0 regrets because he knew he could trust God even in the darkest of times. And that is what practicing your faith with no compromise looks like.